Hello everybody, and welcome to this video in which we are going to be talking about the big one, Cyberpunk 2077. Now, I haven't got a review for this up on digitallydownloaded.net yet, unfortunately, because I was playing it on console. I only got my review code a couple of hours before the game launched, so I wasn't one of those people that got their code early because I was playing on PC. Because it is such a huge game, it is going to take me a while to get through to my review. Probably late next week at this stage, but I have played about a dozen hours now, and that is enough, I think, to have some first impressions. I've got a sense of what this game is about now, and I wanted to talk about that. This video is quite unscripted. I'm not actually working off any notes here. This is really just first impressions, because I wanted to get something out there before the weekend, because a lot of people have been looking forward to this game a great deal. There's obviously been a lot of conversation about it, and I wanted to get my initial thoughts out there as well. So I should probably start by addressing the technical glitches, because there are quite a few of them. It's not something that's of great interest to me. I'm much more a narrative person, and there's a lot to talk about with regards to the narrative of Cyberpunk 2077, but there are definitely graphical glitches, and this game needs patches. It doesn't look too bad on the PlayStation 5, or the footage that you're seeing in this video is captured on PlayStation 5. If you're playing on the previous generation of consoles, there are all kinds of funny business going on with textures popping in very slowly, and it's just not a very pleasant experience. You can look up videos of it in action if you want. But even on the PlayStation 5, there are graphical glitches that I've noticed, with things happening with character models, people getting stuck in walls, heads twisting around like they're from The Exorcist, and so on and so forth. So they're all pretty minor. I haven't had the crashes that a lot of people have had. There have been an awful lot of crashes reported. Some people have been saying that they've had as many as 3 or 4 crashes in the span of an hour or two play, and I'm about a dozen hours in and haven't had a crash yet, so I feel pretty lucky about that. But these are all things that will, of course, be addressed. Projekt Red launched The Witcher 3 in a similar state. It was probably not quite as bad, but it was certainly buggy and glitchy, and they were quite active with patches and engaging with the community to get all of that stuff fixed. So I'm not really concerned about that, and as a note ahead of time, I probably won't be talking too much about that in my review either. This is pretty much the only time I think I'll mention it, because a lot of other people have already covered it as well and done a very good job. They're there, I can confirm that. They do break immersion a little bit, but they will be fixed. Now, the big question for me, and the big concern I had going into the game, was whether it would be a good example of the cyberpunk genre, because if you're going to call your game cyberpunk, then you probably need to deliver on a cyberpunk experience. And the cyberpunk genre means a lot to me. It's one that I find very resonant in terms of its aesthetics, its storytelling, the key themes that tend to be addressed in it. I am a very big fan of the Blade Runner series in particular. Both movies I've watched a lot of times. I've analysed them at great depth. I actually studied the original Blade Runner at university a couple of semesters, so I have I can almost repeat that movie back from heart even today. It's just a genre that has meant a lot to me. So I guess my expectations were quite high with Cyberpunk, being that it is a major blockbuster from a very well-lauded studio that bears the name Cyberpunk. And from the first 12 or so hours, I can say that I'm still a bit concerned about it, really. I'll start with the good. I do think it's a very entertaining game. I think that when it's not bugging out or whatever, the moment-to-moment gameplay is really slick, excellent. The combat feels good, the stealth feels good. Every scenario the developers have created have been really engaging in terms of your ability to approach it from a couple of different angles. It really feels like you've got a lot of freedom to go about anything in this game the way that you really want to. You can avoid combat completely if you want to. You can get really nasty and get your hands very bloody as well if you are interested in playing the game that way, and it really facilitates all of that. The other thing that's really great about it is that Projekt Red really has a way with writing the moment-to-moment gameplay to be engaging. So we saw this quite a lot with The Witcher 3, where every little side quest that you took on really had meaning. And before that, open world games such as the Assassin's Creed series and whatever had a lot of stuff to do, but you were really stuck doing menial tasks like chasing down bits of paper or just chasing icons around the map, which had 1 or 2 lines of dialogue, if that, and then you'd have to go and chase the next icon. It wasn't really engaging in terms of a narrative experience. The Witcher 3 really changed that around by making every little side quest something that had a definable story within its own right, with a beginning, middle and end, and would give you characters to interact with, situations to experience that may or may not have been related to the main quest. But it really helped to build the world and give you a sense of being in this very vibrant world to explore and play through. And Cyberpunk 2077 definitely does that. It is very, very good at it, actually. Every direction I went, when you pulled up the map, there were a lot of icons. And at first that was a little bit overwhelming because, as somebody who has burned out to a great extent on open world games, that's not what I like to see in a map. But then I started to follow some of them around and started to experience the stories and stuff, and I found myself very engaged with it on that level. I was enjoying the process of completing side quests. I was really enjoying the more extended missions and the fact that you would meet these characters that would have these very long discussions with you. Every bit of the writing was engaging and very carefully edited, and the performances were very strong as well. This is a very slick product, and once the developers have patched out the bugs, or at least the more nasty bugs, once it's running at a fairly smooth rate and you're fairly confident that you're not going to crash out when you try and do something, once it gets to that state, it's going to be a very precise, very clean, very well made product. Now, with all of that being said, what Cyberpunk 2077 doesn't do well, at least so far, is in terms of the themes and the overall narrative. Not the moment-to-moment story writing, like I said before, that's excellent, but the narrative itself, which pulls all of the themes together and is the overarching message and meaning of the game. So once again, I am only 12 hours in, and I'm certainly open to having my mind changed about this. I have to keep putting that disclaimer in, otherwise people will think I'm hating on the game, and I'm certainly not doing that. But what you would think is that a developer would want to at least introduce the core themes and experience within the first dozen hours. And so far, Cyberpunk 2077 doesn't really do that. It's observational rather than analytical, and I'll explain what I mean by that. One of the core themes that you would expect from a work of Cyberpunk, and hence the punk in the title, is that it would feature some kind of wariness and criticism of capitalism. This genre is one that is very much about resistance to the establishment. That's what has been the driving force of all punk and sub-genres over the decades. But unfortunately, Cyberpunk 2077 comes across a bit like what you would imagine a suit-wearing executive would see punk as. The game depicts some nasty corporations that are deadly and not accountable at all, so that's there, and that's certainly something you would expect to see in Cyberpunk. There's also representations of unrestrained consumerism. For example, there's a vending machine that you come across in your actual home that you can buy things from, which is pretty amusing, if on the nose. And there are also some aggressive placements of ads and marketing material that are meant to be indicative of a world taken over by capitalism. I mean, ads is in ads within the game world, not real world ads. So the game's just full of marketing. And all of that is stuff that you would expect to see in Cyberpunk, but Cyberpunk 2077 doesn't do anything with this beyond represent it. So it's there, and I guess we're meant to infer that it's bad. But the reality is that it just being there is the extent that Cyberpunk 2077 engages with this stuff, and it doesn't really look into the role of this, of capitalism and its impact on society. I find the game to also have a fairly shallow understanding of the cyber side of Cyberpunk, again at least so far, and I'll give you an example from Blade Runner 2049 as a point of comparison. You remember the holograms in that film and how you could have a hologram partner that would go through all the motions of a domestic life with you, and it was AI driven, so it was intelligent and it behaved very much like a real person, and in fact the movie used visual trickery to imply that that was a real person for a little while until then they revealed themselves to be a digital being. The movie was very clear about all of that kind of stuff. And that technology, that depiction of holograms and AI and stuff, was used to some very intense ends in that film to question everything from the nature of humanity to the idea of the family unit and the alien impact that technology is having on the marginalized in the world of Blade Runner 2049. Meanwhile, over on Cyberpunk 2077, you can watch a performance of a hologram exotic dancer. They even have their boobs out and everything. So that's it. Again, I'm only 12 hours in, so it comes with that disclaimer. But the game's narrative embraces the convenience of technology more generally. So there's the ability to insert chips directly into your head, or the ability to use VR to undertake investigations and find information that you need to complete missions. The game acknowledges that there is a risk inherent with technology since you can be hacked by evil corporations, but Cyberpunk as a genre is not interested in that kind of convenience of technology with some minor risks, or relatively minor risks, in comparison to the technology. That's how corporations in the real world actually think about technology. But really, Cyberpunk as a genre is much more interested in exploring the relationship that humans have with technology and the implications that that has for us as humans and moral beings. Cyberpunk 2077 doesn't seem to be that interested in that so far. Finally, there is an odd tone that runs through the game as well that seems a little bit contrary to the revolutionary spirit of the Cyberpunk genre. A lot of what you're doing in the game is tied to selfish ends. What you need to do to survive, basically. You do what you need to do to survive. You do what you need to do to get ahead. How you can use other people and how they can use you as resources to achieve your goals. These are all things that are pretty common to the plot lines within Cyberpunk 2077. Now, my read on Cyberpunk as a general genre is that it's one about finding humanity and community within worlds that have gone to hell thanks to capitalism and technology. My read on Cyberpunk 2077 is that it's something a little bit more libertarian. There's a fundamental selfishness where relationships are of convenience and ultimately you're out there to leverage what you can get your hands on to dominate, whether that's people or tools. I get a strong sense of the kind of morality that we saw in the Fountainhead or Atlas Shrugged out of this, and I wouldn't exactly say that those were Cyberpunk works. Now, once again, I am only 12 hours in, and if Cyberpunk proves itself to be something different, my review will certainly reflect that. And I'm not being critical of the game. Like I said, I'm having a lot of fun with it. I just think that at the moment I'm just having fun with it, where I was really hoping for something a little bit more cyberpunky. But for now, my concerns are pretty much that it's very similar in tone and impact to The Outer Worlds, which was also a game that I really enjoyed. It's a game that purports to be critical of capitalism and have this kind of punk tone, but really it's just about making a statement without provoking or providing a discussion. But anyway, that's my initial thoughts. Do let me know your own thoughts if you're playing the game. I'm sure there's a lot of you out there. Jump into the comments, say hello. Particularly if you are a fan of Cyberpunk, I'd really like to hear your thoughts about how this game does as a Cyberpunk work, and whether I should just hold my tongue and wait to play on. Maybe these themes do come out later on. I really hope so, because if they do, that plus the quality of the game, otherwise it could be a favourite of mine. Anyway, that's enough for this video. Please do click that like and subscribe button if you enjoy my videos. That way you won't miss any. And please do consider backing me on Patreon if you do follow me, because $1 a month will help me to continue to grow this channel and do a lot more with it, which is obviously what I'd like to do, and that would benefit you as well. You get a lot more videos to watch. Thanks as always. This is the weekend now as I record this, so if you do see this on a Friday afternoon, have a great weekend. Play lots of games, enjoy Cyberpunk if you're playing it, and we will see you next week. Otherwise, if you're watching this video at any other time, have a good day and we'll see you next time.